And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching my son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man I'd sacrificed everything for, sit there in silence, pretending he didn't see what was happening, pretending I wasn't his mother. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 68 years old. I taught high school English for 30 years in a modest public school in Sacramento. When my husband Richard died 15 years ago, I could have fallen apart. Instead, I worked harder. I taught summer classes, I tutored on weekends, and quietly, very quietly, I invested every penny I could spare in real estate. Richard had taught me well before cancer took him. Buy what others overlook, he used to say. Be patient, live below your means. So I did. I bought my first rental property with his life insurance money, then another, then another. I wore the same clothes for years. I drove a 20-year-old Honda. I clipped coupons and made my own coffee. My son David never knew. I wanted him to build his own life, to value hard work over inheritance. I wanted him to be independent, not entitled. So I let him think I was just a teacher scraping by, working extra shifts to make ends meet. Looking back now, maybe that was my first mistake. David grew up to be exactly what I'd hoped: hardworking, ambitious, successful. He became a corporate lawyer at one of San Francisco's top firms. I was so proud. Then 3 years ago, he married Victoria Sterling. Victoria came from old money, the kind of family that summers in the Hamptons and winters in Aspen. Her father owned a chain of luxury hotels. Her mother sat on every charity board that mattered. And Victoria herself had built a social media empire. 500,000 followers watching her curated life of designer handbags and champagne brunches. I tried to be happy for David. I really did. But from the moment I met Victoria, I felt it, that look. The way her eyes would scan my off-brand purse, my department store dress, my sensible shoes, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she kissed my cheek. "David's told me so much about you," she'd said at our first meeting, her voice dripping with honey. A public school teacher for 30 years. How? Noble, noble. As if sacrifice was quaint, as if dedication was adorable. Over the next 3 years, I saw my son less and less. Phone calls became shorter, visits became rare. Victoria had a way of scheduling events on holidays I'd planned to spend with David. "Oh, Mom can't make it to Aspen for Christmas? That's too bad." "Well, we'll send pictures." I never complained. I told myself David was building his own life, his own family. That's what children do. That's what I wanted for him. Then last week, I got the phone call. "Mom!" David's voice was warm, excited even. "I'm turning 40 next Saturday. Victoria's throwing me a birthday dinner at her father's hotel, the Grand View. You know, the rooftop restaurant? She wants you to come." Family dinner, just close family. My heart lifted. Maybe this was it. Maybe Victoria was finally ready to accept me. Maybe my son had talked to her, told her how much it would mean to have his mother there. "I'd love to," I said. "Great. It's black tie, by the way, 7 o'clock. See you there." Black tie. I didn't own anything black tie, but I had something better, a traditional Chinese silk dress, deep blue with hand-embroidered peonies, that Richard had bought me in Hong Kong 30 years ago. I'd saved it, kept it perfect. It was elegant, timeless, expensive in a way that didn't scream labels. I wore it that Saturday night, with the jade earrings Richard had given me on our wedding day. I took a cab to the Grandview. Parking there cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and rode the glass elevator to the rooftop. The doors opened onto something out of a magazine. Soft lights strung overhead like stars. White-clothed tables arranged around a central dance floor. And at the largest table, beneath a canopy of flowers that must have cost thousands, sat David, and Victoria, and her sister Emma with Emma's husband, and Victoria's parents, all of them dressed like they were attending the Oscars. They turned as I approached. Victoria's eyes landed on my dress, and for just a moment, a flash so quick I almost missed it, her lip curled. "Margaret," she called out, her voice bright and false. "You made it." "Oh, how? Traditional. Is that vintage?" The way she said vintage made it sound like ancient. "It was my late husband's gift," I said quietly, taking a seat at the far end of the table. How sentimental, Victoria's mother murmured, exchanging a glance with her daughter. David stood, kissed my cheek. Hi, Mom. Glad you could make it. Happy birthday, sweetheart. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked nervous. Why did he look nervous? A waiter approached with menus. Everyone ordered complicated dishes with French names I couldn't pronounce. Wagyu beef, truffle risotto, Chilean sea bass. The prices weren't listed, but I'd taught long enough to know what discretion meant. When the waiter turned to me, Victoria interrupted. Oh, we've already ordered for Margaret, she said, her smile sharp as glass. At her age, rich food can be so hard on the digestion. We got the senior-friendly option. Isn't that thoughtful? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I appreciate the thought, but I'm quite capable of. No, I insist. Victoria waved her hand. It's butternut squash soup and crackers. Very light, very healthy. You'll thank me later. Around the table, no one said a word. David stared at his water glass. Emma smirked. Victoria's father cleared his throat and looked away. The waiter nodded and left. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, and made a decision. I would stay. I would watch. I would see exactly who my son had become. The first course arrived. Everyone received beautiful plates of seared scallops with microgreens. I received a bowl of orange soup with 3 crackers on the side. Oh, that looks filling, Emma said, barely hiding her laugh. I picked up my spoon. The soup was cold. I stayed quiet. I wanted to see how far this would go. Would David say something? Would he defend me? He didn't. Victoria launched into a story about her latest brand partnership, a luxury skincare line that wanted to sponsor her content. They're paying 6 figures just for 3 posts. Can you believe it? I mean, I know my worth, but still, you've built such an empire, darling, her mother cooed. All on your own. I thought about the trust fund Victoria had mentioned once, the small $1 million investment her father had made in her business. But I said nothing. The main courses arrived, steaks so tender they practically melted, lobster tails glistening with butter, sides of roasted vegetables and truffle potatoes. I received another bowl of soup, tomato this time. We ordered you a second course, Victoria explained. Since the first was so light, aren't we considerate? She looked at me expectantly, waiting for gratitude. Very considerate, I said evenly. Something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment? She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to protest, to make a scene, to give her a reason to paint me as the difficult mother-in-law. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. David cut his steak, his jaw tight. He knew this was wrong. But he said nothing. I stayed because I needed to see if my son would find his spine. I stayed because each moment of silence was a test. Would he defend me? When? The answer, I was learning, was never. So, Margaret, Victoria's father said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. David tells us you're retired now. Must be nice, having all that free time. I keep busy, I said. Oh, I'm sure. Knitting, reading, that sort of thing? Emma asked, her tone condescending. Among other things, Victoria laughed. The sound like breaking glass. Mother hobbies. How sweet. Meanwhile, David and I are building an empire. His law career is taking off. And with my social media presence, we're really making a name for ourselves. A power couple, her mother agreed. You must be so proud, Margaret, seeing how far David has come. How far he'd come. As if where he started with me, in our small house, with my teacher's salary was something to escape from. I thought about the scholarship fund I'd been secretly contributing to at David's old high school. 20 students had gone to college on that money. None of them knew my name. I stayed quiet. After dinner came the gifts. A photographer Victoria had hired circled the table, taking pictures for her Instagram. I watched as Victoria orchestrated every shot, every angle. Just the young family, please, she directed when it was time for group photos. David, me, Emma, James, Mom, Dad. Perfect! I sat at the edge of the frame, not included. David saw. His eyes met mine for a brief second. Then he looked away and smiled for the camera. That was when something inside me crystallized. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This was deliberate. Victoria opened her gifts. From her parents, keys to a new Tesla. From Emma, a weekend at a spa resort. From her friends, designer bags, expensive jewelry. Then David opened his. A vintage watch from Victoria's father. A first edition book from Emma. Luxury after luxury. Finally, Victoria picked up a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "Oh, what's this?" She read the tag. "From Margaret." "How sweet." She opened it carefully, maintaining her Instagram-perfect composure. Inside was a scarf I'd spent 3 months knitting. I'd used yarn from Richard's favorite cardigan, the one he'd worn every Sunday. The one David used to curl up in when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. I'd woven in patterns that meant something. The constellation David was born under, the Chinese character for strength, the outline of our old house. Victoria held it up. The table went quiet. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "How? Handmade." Emma giggled. Did you knit that yourself?" "I did," I said quietly. Victoria folded it carefully, her smile never wavering. "Well, this will be perfect for our charity drive next month. The homeless shelter will absolutely love it. They appreciate this sort of thing." She set it aside, already forgotten. David said nothing. I stood up. Everyone looked at me expectantly. Victoria's smile widened. She thought I was leaving, thought she'd won. Instead, I excused myself to the restroom. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked at the dress Richard had bought me, at the jade earrings that had survived 30 years. I thought about the woman I'd been, the widow who'd refused to give up, who'd worked 3 jobs some years to give her son opportunities, who'd built a small fortune in silence while living like she had nothing. I thought about the boy who used to cry in my arms, who used to tell me I was the strongest person he knew, and I made my decision. When I returned to the table, Victoria was mid-story about her latest Instagram campaign. I sat down quietly. The photographer was packing up his equipment. That's when the hotel manager appeared. He was a tall man in an impeccable suit, and he walked directly to our table with purpose. "Mrs. Chen," he said, addressing me, "I'm so sorry to interrupt your celebration." The table went silent. Victoria's smile froze. "I wanted to personally deliver this." He handed me a leather portfolio. "The paperwork for the scholarship fund, as you requested. The ballroom renovation is complete, and we'll be unveiling the new name tomorrow." I took the portfolio, aware of every eye on me. "What scholarship fund?" David asked, his voice confused. The manager smiled. "Your mother has been one of the Grandview's most generous benefactors for the past 5 years. She's funded over 50 full scholarships for hospitality students through our program. The board voted unanimously to rename our main ballroom in honor of her late husband." Victoria's face had gone pale. "I'm sorry." "What?" "The Richard Chen Memorial Scholarship Hall," the manager continued, "in recognition of Mrs. Chen's $5 million endowment." The photographer's camera clicked. He'd captured Victoria's expression perfectly. $5 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Emma's mouth had actually fallen open. Victoria's mother had set down her wine glass, her hand shaking slightly. David was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. $5 million? Victoria whispered. I opened the portfolio. The paperwork was all there, exactly as I'd requested when I'd visited the hotel that morning. I'd signed it all, made it official. The donation was done. "I don't understand," David said. "Mom, how? You're a teacher. How do you have—" "I was a teacher," I corrected gently. "I also made some wise investments over the years. Your father taught me well before he died, but you always said you worked extra shifts. You lived so modestly." "I did work extra shifts. I do live modestly. I chose to." I looked at him directly. "I wanted you to build your own success, David. To value hard work over inheritance. To understand that worth isn't measured in labels or Instagram followers." Victoria found her voice. You've had millions this whole time? And you let us think." "I let you think what you wanted to think," I said calmly. "I never claimed to be poor. You assumed, based on my clothes, my car, my lifestyle. You judged me." I stood up, gathering my small purse. "The scarf I made for David," I continued. Looking at Victoria, I knitted it with yarn from his father's favorite sweater. the sweater David used to wrap himself in when he had nightmares. The sweater he wore to his high school graduation because he said it made him feel like his dad was there. I worked that yarn into every stitch, with patterns that told the story of our family. I turned to David. You were going to donate it to charity. You didn't even recognize it. Tears were streaming down my son's face. Mom, I came tonight because I hoped my voice caught, but I steadied it. I hoped that family still mattered, that respect was still given, not bought, that my son would remember where he came from. I looked around the table, at Victoria, whose perfect composure had crumbled, at Emma, who couldn't meet my eyes, at Victoria's parents, who suddenly looked very small. I don't need your Tesla or your designer gifts, I said quietly. I don't need to prove my worth with brand names and price tags. I know who I am. I know what I've built. I know what I've survived. I picked up the portfolio. The scholarship students I'm funding, most of them come from single-parent homes, from mothers working multiple jobs, from families that look like mine did 30 years ago. They'll never know my name, but they'll get their education. They'll get their chance. I walked to David, placing my hand on his shoulder. Happy birthday, son. I hope you got everything you wanted tonight. His hand came up to cover mine, but I gently pulled away. Mrs. Chen, the manager said as I turned to leave. Your car is waiting downstairs. Thank you, Thomas. I walked to the elevator, my head high. Behind me, I heard Victoria's sharp whisper. David, say something. Go after her. But he didn't. The elevator doors closed, and I rode down in silence. Through the glass walls, I could see the city lights spreading out below. Somewhere out there were my properties, my investments, my quiet empire. Somewhere out there were students who would receive letters next week telling them their tuition was paid in full. Somewhere up there, my son was learning what it cost to stay silent. I stepped into the waiting car, not a taxi this time, but the town car the hotel always sent for me when I visited for board meetings. The driver knew not to make small talk. At home, I changed out of Richard's dress and hung it carefully in the closet. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Mom, please, can we talk? I set the phone down without responding. Not yet. Not tonight. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my email. There was a message from the scholarship committee with photos from this year's recipients. 23 students, all beaming at the camera, holding acceptance letters to colleges they never thought they could afford. One girl, Maria, looked so much like I had at 18, hopeful and terrified and determined. Her mother cleaned hotel rooms, worked nights, sacrificed everything, just like I had. I typed a response to the committee. Please send my congratulations to all recipients, and please ensure Maria gets the extra stipend we discussed for books and supplies. 3 months later, I was sitting in that same ballroom, newly renamed, gleaming with fresh paint and new carpeting, watching Maria accept her scholarship certificate. She gave a speech about her mother, about sacrifice, about gratitude. Her mother sat in the front row, crying. I sat in the back, where no one would notice me. That's how I preferred it. My phone buzzed. Another text from David. He'd been trying to reach me every week. I'd responded twice, brief messages. I'm well. I need time. Victoria, I'd heard through the grapevine, had taken down most of her social media. The photographer had leaked one photo of her face when the manager revealed my donation, and it had gone viral. Entitled Influencer Shocked by Mother-in-Law's Secret Fortune, the headlines read. Her follower count had dropped by 100,000. David had called last week, his voice broken. Mom, Victoria and I are going to counseling. She's trying to understand, to change. I know I failed you. I know what I let happen. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I'd listened. I'd said, I hope you both find what you're looking for. Then I'd hung up. Now, watching Maria hug her mother, watching them cry together with joy, I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite peace, the wound was still too fresh, but something close. I'd lost a son that night at the Grandview. Or maybe I'd lost him years ago, in small moments, in silences that I'd excused as his busy life. But I'd found something else. Purpose. Clarity. The knowledge that my worth wasn't determined by whether my child valued me. Maria's mother looked up, scanning the crowd. Someone must have told her I was here. Our eyes met across the room. She mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded. She didn't need to thank me. Her daughter's success, her daughter's future, that was thanks enough. As I left the ceremony, my phone buzzed again. Not David this time. A voicemail from my nephew, Richard's sister's son, who I'd always been close to. "Aunt Margaret, just wanted to check in. The kids keep asking when you're coming to visit. They miss their Auntie Maggie." Call me? Family isn't always the one you're born into, I thought. Sometimes it's the one you choose. Sometimes it's the students you help, the causes you support, the people who see your worth without needing proof. I called him back. "How's next weekend?" "I'll bring that pineapple upside-down cake the kids love." His laugh was warm. "They'll be so excited. We love you, Aunt Maggie." "I love you too." I hung up and walked to my car, still that same 20-year-old Honda. It ran perfectly well. No need to replace it. As I drove home through the city, past the buildings I owned but would never brag about, past the life I'd built in silence, I thought about that dinner, about the soup and crackers, about the discarded scarf, about my son's silence, and I realized I didn't need his validation to know my worth. I didn't need Victoria's respect to know who I was. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I'd already proven it to the person who mattered most, myself, the woman who'd survived loss, who'd built an empire from minimum wage and smart choices, who'd raised a son alone and put him through law school, who'd given 53 students a future they never dreamed possible. That woman didn't need anyone's permission to be proud. I pulled into my driveway, the modest house I'd bought 30 years ago, and never felt the need to leave. Inside, the lights were warm. My books waited, my tea kettle, my quiet, simple, intentionally modest life that I'd chosen. I'd chosen all of it. And that, I realized, was worth more than any rooftop dinner, any designer dress, any social media empire. Worth, I'd finally learned, wasn't something you wore on the outside. It was something you built on the inside. Stitch by quiet stitch, choice by deliberate choice, and mine was unshakable.